The day we moved into our new home marked the beginning of a nightmare we could never have anticipated. The house, a charming colonial nestled on the edge of a dense, ancient forest, seemed like the perfect place to start fresh. Its history was veiled in mystery, but that was part of its allure. Little did we know, those mysteries were far more sinister than we ever imagined. The first sign that something was amiss occurred on our very first night. As I lay in bed, I heard faint whispers drifting through the air, almost like a distant chant carried by an eerie, cold breeze. On the second night, the children, Maggie and Max, came screaming into the room, describing shadowy figures that lurked in the corners of their rooms. I assumed it might have been caused by the stress of the move. But in the days that followed, our seemingly idyllic life took a sinister turn. Doors slammed shut with a deafening force that left our ears ringing. The temperature in the house fluctuated wildly, sometimes plummeting to bone-chilling cold, and at other times, rising to unbearable heat. It was as if an unseen malevolence had taken up residence with us, and its presence was only growing stronger. One fateful evening, as Maggie's piercing screams shattered the stillness of the night, my heart raced, and I leaped out of bed. I rushed to our children's room, where I found Max curled up in the corner, his small frame trembling with fear. My wife stayed with him, trying to comfort him, while I followed the sound of Maggie's panicked cries echoing through the house. The source of the screams led me down to the basement, to a room I hadn't yet explored. The basement room's door was locked, and I pounded on it with all my might, desperate to reach my daughter. After several frantic, heart-pounding knocks, the door finally gave way. I burst into the room, and the sight that met my eyes filled me with dread. Maggie lay on the floor, she struggled to draw breath. Her eyes, once vibrant with life, now glistened with an otherworldly terror. I knelt by her side, holding her trembling body in my arms, calling out her name as I tried to understand what had happened. In the following days, Maggie's behavior grew increasingly bizarre and unnerving. She would speak in a voice that was not her own, uttering words in languages we couldn't comprehend. Her eyes would turn an unsettling shade of red, and she would often speak of a presence in the house, an entity that whispered malevolent secrets to her in the dead of night. It was as if something had taken hold of her, something dark and insidious. Desperate for answers, we consulted paranormal experts and clergy, but their attempts to cleanse the house were in vain. The oppressive atmosphere pushed us to the brink. Our once loving family became fractured, torn apart by fear and paranoia. We couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and we were haunted by the relentless belief that something malevolent lurked just beyond our perception. With our backs against the wall, we decided to reach out to a renowned medium, Father Jameson, known for his ability to communicate with spirits and confront malevolent entities. As he entered our home, his eyes widened in a way that sent shivers down my spine. He told us that this was not just a restless spirit but something far more sinister, a demon that hungered for the soul of our daughter. The only way to save her is through an exorcism. We were torn, uncertain about the dangers an exorcism might pose to Maggie, but the sinister transformation she was undergoing left us with no other choice. The next night, I was startled awake by the sound of Maggie's eerie, haunting laughter echoing through the house. Panic surged through my veins as I rushed to check on her, my heart pounding with dread. I cautiously made my way down the dimly lit hallway, the air heavy with foreboding. Suddenly, without warning, the bathroom door slammed shut with a deafening force, causing me to jump in fright. I approached slowly, my hands trembling, and carefully pushed the door open, not knowing what horrors awaited me inside. And then, like a nightmarish apparition, Maggie sprang out from behind the door, a wicked glint in her eyes and a knife in her hand. Before I could react, she cut me with the knife. Pain seared through my leg, and I cried out as I collapsed to the ground, blood oozing from the wound. Maggie, her face contorted with an evil that was not her own, pounced on me, her tiny hands gripping the knife as she attempted to stab me. Her strength and determination were inhuman, and I knew that this was not my daughter but the demon that had taken hold of her. In that horrifying moment, I felt utterly helpless, the weight of the supernatural terror crushing me. Just as I thought all hope was lost, my wife rushed into the room, her eyes wide with fear and determination. With a desperate, combined effort, we managed to wrest the knife from Maggie's grasp. The room was filled with a cacophony of screams, both Maggie's and ours, as we struggled to restrain her. In that darkest hour, with our daughter still possessed by the demon's evil influence, we had no choice but to call Father Jameson. With trembling hands and a heart heavy with dread, we reached out to him, begging for his help. Father Jameson arrived swiftly, his demeanor resolute as he prepared to perform the exorcism that would hopefully free Maggie from the demonic grip. The room was charged with an ominous energy as he began the ritual, the air growing heavy with the weight of the supernatural forces at play. The exorcism was a harrowing battle, a struggle between the forces of good and evil. Maggie's contorted body writhed and twisted, her voice taking on an otherworldly, guttural quality as the demon fought to maintain its hold. But Father Jameson's faith and determination were unwavering, and he continued to recite the ancient incantations with unshakable resolve. As the exorcism reached its climax, the room seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly force, and a deafening, otherworldly roar echoed through the house. And then, as suddenly as it had all begun, Maggie fell limp, her body released from the demon's clutches. She lay motionless, her eyes once again filled with the innocence of a child. Tears streamed down our faces as we gathered her in our arms, our daughter finally free from the nightmare that had consumed her. We held each other, a family torn apart by darkness and then reunited by the light. The horror was over, but its scars would forever linger, a reminder of the malevolent force that had tried to claim our souls.
As I stood before the wrought iron gates that guarded the entrance to the remote country estate, I felt a peculiar mixture of excitement and trepidation. The massive mansion beyond the gates had been bequeathed to me by my late grandmother, a woman I'd never met, nor had any desire to meet, according to my mother. In fact, my mother had always insisted that her own mother was long dead. Yet, here I was, about to step into the mysterious world of my estranged grandmother. As I entered the mansion's grand foyer, I couldn't help but admire its grandeur, despite the dust and cobwebs that clung to every corner. My grandmother's legacy had come as a shock, and despite my mother's adamant silence about her own past, the prospect of a new life in the countryside was appealing. I had always been a city dweller, but the thought of escaping the hustle and bustle drew me to this remote and quiet place. In the beginning, my days were filled with exploration, and the old mansion revealed its secrets slowly. But as I settled into my new life, I began to experience inexplicable phenomena. I could see shadows moving, whispers drifted on the breeze, and doors creaked open and shut of their own volition. One night, I was awakened by eerie, mournful wails that echoed through the corridors. It sounded like the anguished cries of lost souls. I ventured into the dark hallways, following the sounds, and they led me to an old and locked room on the upper floor. With a heavy iron key that I found in one of the dusty drawers, I unlocked the door. The room was empty, its air heavy with the weight of forgotten secrets. The sole inhabitant of this forgotten chamber was a dusty box of old films, meticulously preserved by my ancestors. Intrigued by the old films, I realized that I needed a movie projector to view them. As the days turned into weeks, the mansion's paranormal activity seemed to intensify. Whispering voices echoed through the corridors at all hours, and unexplained shadows darted around corners. Some nights, I was awakened by the mournful wails that had first led me to the locked room. The relentless presence of these restless spirits was undeniable. One night I woke up from another nightmare, my body covered in a cold sweat. I went to the toilet. As I approached the mirror, the reflection that gazed back at me bore a sinister, chilling smile. Panic surged through my veins, and I turned to flee. But the door to the hallway was locked, and the feeling of entrapment was inescapable. The room was closing in on me, the walls shrinking with a supernatural force. My reflection, twisted and malevolent, began to emerge from the mirror. Its inhuman strength overpowered me, and my own reflection's hands closed around my throat, tightening with an iron grip. I was helpless, gasping for breath as my own doppelganger sought to end me. Just when it seemed my strength was fading, everything shifted. The room, the reflection, all the terror and suffocating darkness, disappeared in an instant. I was left trembling, my heart pounding as I gazed at my ordinary reflection in the mirror. It was a chilling, inexplicable encounter that left me shaken and terrified. But I knew it was a clue, a message from the vengeful spirits that haunted the estate. The answer had to lie within the old films. The following day, with newfound determination, I set out to buy a movie projector from an old hobby shop in town. It was time to dive deeper into the disturbing history captured on those reels, hoping that somewhere in the past, I would find the key to put the restless spirits to rest. The first film was dated more than a century ago. As the flickering images filled the screen, I was transported back in time. The film chronicled the early years of my great-great-grandfather, a man I had only heard about in family tales. The story was a fascinating one. He and his ex-wife had once been deeply in love, embarking on an ambitious journey to build the grand estate that now stood before me. The film captured their lives together, their unwavering bond and shared dreams. I watched in awe as the mansion I now called home took shape under their loving care. However, as the years passed, a shadow fell upon their marriage. The films painted a heart-wrenching picture of their relationship's decline. Arguments and quarrels marred their happiness, and the cracks in their once solid union began to show. The turning point came when my great-great-grandfather was caught with another woman. An explosive confrontation led to his wife leaving him, heartbroken and embittered. What followed was a tale of sorrow and vengeance. In her grief, my great-great-grandfather's ex-wife discovered that he had a child with his new wife. Blinded by rage and a desire for retribution, she sought out an old woman in the nearby town, known to be a witch with a reputation for curses. The films revealed the transaction between my great-great-grandfather's ex-wife and the witch, a deal sealed with a substantial sum of money. The curse that befell their offspring, the same curse that now haunted me, was born from a heart brimming with anger and the supernatural influence of the old woman considered a witch. The realization that my newfound paranormal experiences were linked to this ancient curse sent shivers down my spine. The vengeful spirits that roamed the mansion were a direct consequence of a century-old act of wrath, a lingering malevolence that could no longer be ignored. With a lot of effort, I managed to find a descendant of the witch from the movies, and I will visit her tomorrow. Wish me luck!
I had always prided myself on my ability to sell houses. It was more than just a job, it was my passion, my life's calling. But there was one house that haunted my dreams, a property that had forever tainted my reputation as a real estate agent. It was a grand, old Victorian home, nestled at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. When I first walked through its ornate front doors, I was captivated by its charm. The hardwood floors gleamed, and the chandeliers cast an enchanting glow. But I should have known better, for behind the charming facade, there was a darkness that clung to every corner. I had sold the house to the Collins family, a young couple with a child on the way. They were full of hope and dreams when they moved in, unaware of the malevolent spirits that called that house their home. The nightmare began a few months after the Collins moved in. One night I woke up to my phone ringing. The caller name displayed Mr. Collins, but the voice that emanated from the other end of the line was anything but human. It was a chilling, otherworldly resonance that sent shivers down my spine. "You sold us this nightmare," the voice hissed, each word dripping with an eerie, unplaceable accent. "You will pay for it." The cryptic threat left me paralyzed, my heart pounding as the call abruptly ended. I couldn't bring myself to dial the number again, my fingers trembling with dread. The next day, I couldn't shake the haunting call from my mind. I decided to visit the Collins family, hoping to alleviate my growing anxiety. But when I arrived at the Victorian home, a sense of foreboding overwhelmed me. I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. I called out for the Collinses, my voice echoing through the empty house, but only silence greeted me. I stepped inside, the hardwood floors creaking beneath my feet as I ventured deeper into the shadows. The rooms were cold and still, shrouded in an unsettling hush. It was as if time had frozen within those walls, and the air held an oppressive weight. I searched every corner, but there was no sign of the family who had once called this place home. The following days were filled with calls to Mr. Collins, but no one answered. The unease grew as I reached out to the local authorities. The police conducted a thorough investigation, but the mystery of the Collins family's disappearance only deepened. No clues, no leads, just an empty house and a chilling absence. Weeks turned into months, and the Collinses were officially listed as missing. The house had claimed them, and I couldn't shake the guilt that weighed on my shoulders. It was my job to sell homes, but I had unknowingly condemned this family to a fate I couldn't comprehend. The realization that the house held a dark and terrible secret consumed me. The Collins family had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a haunting mystery. I delved into the history of the house, determined to uncover the secrets hidden within its walls. The original owner, a man named Edward Sinclair, had been a well-respected figure in the community. His family, a wife and 2 children, lived in the house with him. But their lives had been tragically cut short by a serial killer who had terrorized the town over a century ago. The gruesome details of the murders were chilling. The family had been found brutally slain in their own home, their lives extinguished in the most gruesome manner. The killer had left a trail of blood and chaos, and the house had forever been stained by the atrocity. I also found out about another disappearance of people that happened 5 months after they bought the house. With a newfound determination, I decided to spend a few weeks in the house to solve the mystery. The first 2 weeks within the house passed relatively uneventfully. Each day, I scoured the house for clues, meticulously documenting its history and the disappearances that had plagued it over the years. But it wasn't until the 3rd week that the malevolent forces lurking within the Victorian home began to reveal themselves. One evening, as I was preparing to retire to bed, a bone-chilling event unfolded. The bedroom door, once ornate and grand, slammed shut with a force so brutal it felt as though the very foundations of the house shuddered. My heart pounded in my chest, and I was gripped by a paralyzing terror. As the days turned into weeks, the nightmares began to torment me mercilessly. Each night, I would wake up in a cold sweat, haunted by nightmarish visions that seemed to bridge the gap between the past and the present. Strange occurrences continued to plague me. Locks and doors would inexplicably open, while plates and glasses would shatter into 1,000 pieces without any apparent cause. The house was in a constant state of chaos, and I could feel the oppressive presence. As the weeks wore on, a suffocating dread began to settle over me, a feeling that seemed to permeate every inch of the house. My health deteriorated, and I was plagued by a persistent sense of unease. One fateful night while I was sleeping in my bed, an invisible force seized my leg. It pulled me out of bed with an unholy strength that defied explanation. My heart raced, and terror coursed through my veins. In that horrifying moment, I realized that I had pushed the boundaries of reason and safety too far. I fled from the house in a wild panic, leaving behind the cursed Victorian home that had haunted my dreams and shattered my reputation as a real estate agent. With a heart heavy with the weight of my experiences, I made a solemn vow to never return to that place of darkness. The house would remain an enigma, its secrets buried deep within its haunted walls. In the end, I decided that the house was not meant to be sold, for it was a place where the darkness of the past continued to claim those who dared to enter. The malevolent spirits remained the true masters of the grand Victorian home, and I would ensure that its secrets would remain forever hidden.